Alright, let's take a look at the smudgers and the blenders. The word means pretty much the same thing. If I had to call a difference, I would say blend blurs between two regions and smudge kind of drags the paint around. But we'll take a look at this. I have a very simple file here. I used the hard blocker inner brush from the general tab just to lay down an area of yellow next to an area of blue with a hard edge, so we've got something to blend with. And what I'll do as well, I'll come to my layers panel, I will swipe to the left, I'll duplicate that layer and make the one underneath invisible, just so I can call the same thing up if I need to. So let's come to our smudge tool. It's the one I'm circling now. Open it up, and I have a folder here called Blend and Glaze. The very top two, Color Glazer and Overlay Glazer, I will talk about those in a separate video. But for now, the rest of the brushes in this folder, they're to help me blend things in different ways. So let's take a look at the top one. DC Blend Blur. Let's just check I'm on the right layer. Yes, I am. So my opacity is set to 100% and my brush size, well, any size I want. Is that going to be big enough to show you what it does? No, let's make it a bit bigger. Let's make it 50% big and just come to this area where you can see my brush is hovering. And if I come here, everything just blends nice and smoothly. I could try coming underneath and going side to side, but you can see that doesn't make a difference. All this blend blur brush does is create a soft transition. And just in case you're thinking, well, okay, yeah, great, it's actually quite a big deal. I know some very good artists who basically paint with a very simple brush with a very hard edge, and then if they want a large soft area, they'll set their brush size large. If they want something a bit smaller, they make the brush size smaller. So you get more of a controlled area or a smaller, harder transition like this. And just by varying the size of their blending brush, you end up with much more control than if you were to use, say, an airbrush. Because with an airbrush, you can control the size, but you can't control the kind of soft transitions we're doing here to the same level of fine detail. Look, you can see, big area, little tiny area, and anything you want in between. You're controlling your soft borders. That's with my brush set to 100% opaque. Let's try it, say, around about 50% opaque. And try. Now I'm having to scrub a little bit harder to get the same effect. But because I get to control the opacity, I also get to control the rate of smudge. This gives me even more control. So for any of the brushes, control the size and you control your transitions from one area to another. Control the opacity and you get to control how fast you build up the effect. All right, those are the main things I wanted to say about the smudge brushes in general. But we've used DC Blend Blur. Let's try that. Just come on, let's crank it up to 100%. And there's my transition. If I come to the one underneath, Blend Smudge Round, it works very similarly. The difference being is that this one, if I go side to side, you see that? This is more of a smudging brush. Your blending brush, you get a smooth transition. With a smudging brush, you get a smooth transition, but you get to drag the paint from one area to another. This is a huge difference, and it gives you a huge amount of control. Look, if I make it smaller, or smaller again. See that? Now by varying the size and the direction that I'm smudging in, I can build up some very interesting textured effects. If you want to draw hair and fur, for example, well, look at this. A couple of minutes ago, that was a hard edge. Now look at it. All kinds of interesting textures going on. Let's compare that with Blend, Smudge, Taper. This one works in the same way, but the difference being is if I press hard, I get a much wider brush, and if I press softer, I get a narrower brush. So now I get to control the opacity of it, and also how thick or thin that smudgy line is. Again, if you're doing hair or fur, the smudging tools are your friends. Okay, those are the three basic blending brushes. Everything else adds a little bit more texture into what you're doing. Let's try DC Cloud and Blend. Opacity up again, and let's come to underneath. Oh, look at that. That's a really strong effect. Let's take the opacity down to where it was before. Try the same thing again. Now I can start to build things up a little bit more gradually, but I'm getting more of a textured finish. And that can have a great impact on the character of your painting. And for example, well, let's try Crunchy Smudge. It's still giving me a texture, but a little bit more texture than the brush on top. And these are the kind of brushes I would happily use if I was using my watercolour brushes. Because with watercolour paints over the past, at least 50 years, it's very much a case of what kind of interesting textures can I create using watercolour. So that's what these brushes are for. I think what I'll do, I will duplicate the layer underneath, get rid of the layer on top and make my new duplicate visible again, because I just want to take a look at some of these brushes underneath, because these are all designed to emulate certain textures. Let me show you, for example, DC Texturizer 1. Opacity is on 100. Let's come here. Well, you can see it's creating a bit of a texture here by dragging different colors together. But the problem with this is that that harsh line between the yellow and the blue I've got going down, that's too obvious. So in order to get the best out of all of these brushes which are underneath, what I recommend you do first, if I just undo that a few times, is use the brushes on top to soften the border like this, so you don't have that hard border to play around with. Then come in, brush texturizer 1, and create an effect there. Let's just try a few more of these. So I'll use DC Blend Blur, my default one, and just create a soft border going all the way down there. And let's do some here as well. Wow, you can work quickly with these brushes. Now, Texturizer 2. Push one area into another for all kinds of interesting effects. Texturizer 3. Whoa. Now with all of these, you can use them as regular paintbrushes. So you always have that option. Let's come down to the bottom and let's try Isopropanol Smudger. And look how quickly you can use these brushes to create some really very natural, very watercolory type effects. Again with these, a little bit of blurring before you start is a good idea, because if I come up to here, for example, you can see you've got that hard edge. So don't forget, undo that. Come up to the top ones, the nice smooth ones. Put a bit of blur in there. And yeah, why not? Drag it around a little bit. Then come back. DC Texturizer 1, let's try that. Now how quickly can you build up some pretty intense textured effects just by dragging the brush around? There's plenty there for you to play around with. Oh, come on, I'm curious. Let's try Gritty Smudger. Yeah, that's giving me some nice gritty effects. And these are the kind of effects I would expect to see in, say, a watercolor painting, maybe a pastel drawing. The kind of pens and paints that people will use often to create some interesting effects. Okay, those are the smudger brushes, and I hope you have plenty of hours of fun with those.